I was eating cereal straight from the box when they offered me $1 million. No bowl. No spoon. Standing at my kitchen counter in my ex-husband's old university sweatshirt, the one I had kept purely out of laziness, with my hair in a knot that hadn't been intentional, and a small stain on my left sleeve that I had been ignoring for 3 days. That was the state I was in when the knock came. That was the state I was in when everything changed. But before I tell you about the knock, I need to tell you about Marcus. Because you cannot understand the $1 million without understanding the marriage. And you cannot understand the marriage without understanding the woman I used to be, the woman who had walked into a courthouse 2 years ago, signed her name on a set of documents, and walked out feeling like she had just jumped off a cliff without checking whether there was water below. Marcus and I had been together for 6 years. Married for 3 of them. He was brilliant in the way that certain people are brilliant, the kind that fills every room they walk into, that makes everyone around them feel simultaneously inspired and slightly inferior. He had started a tech company at 28. By 32, it had been acquired for $40 million. He had the confidence of someone who had never once doubted that the world would arrange itself around his needs. And for a long time, I had been part of that arrangement. My name is Claire. I was a graphic designer when we met, freelance, scrappy, genuinely passionate about my work. I had a small but loyal client base, a studio apartment covered in mood boards and Pantone swatches, and a life that was modest and entirely mine. Then I fell in love with Marcus. And slowly, in the way these things happen when you're not paying attention, my life became a supporting role in his. I gave up my studio apartment for his penthouse. I scaled back my freelance work because his schedule required flexibility. I became the person who managed the dinner parties and the travel logistics and the 1,000 invisible things that kept his world running smoothly. I told myself I was choosing this. I told myself I was happy. I told myself that until the morning I woke up and realized I couldn't remember the last time I had designed anything just because I wanted to. The divorce was mutual in the way that quiet endings often are, not explosive, not dramatic, just 2 people who had grown in opposite directions finally admitting the distance between them. Marcus kept the penthouse. I kept my name, my portfolio hard drive, and that sweatshirt I mentioned, the gray one with the university logo that had always been too big for him and fit me like a hug. I moved into a rental house on Birch Street. Small. A little drafty. A backyard with a garden that had been neglected long enough to look genuinely wild. And I started over. The first year was about survival. The second year was about something harder, figuring out who I actually was when nobody needed me to be anything in particular. I went back to graphic design. Slowly. A logo project here, a brand identity there. My hands remembered things my brain had almost forgotten. I started waking up at 6 in the morning not because I had to but because I wanted to, because I had ideas and the rare, extraordinary luxury of time and space to follow them. I let the backyard be wild for a while. Then, sometime in spring, I started gardening. Badly at first. Then less badly. I made friends with my neighbor, an elderly woman named Dot, who brought me zucchini from her garden and asked nosy questions about my love life with such cheerful transparency that I couldn't be offended. I was not wealthy. Marcus and I had kept finances separate, one of the few wise decisions of our marriage, and what I had was modest but mine. Some months were tighter than others. I had learned to cook well out of necessity and had discovered, to my surprise, that I actually loved it. I was, by the morning of the knock, 2 years and 3 months out of my marriage. I was 34 years old. I was standing in my kitchen eating dry cereal at 9 in the morning because I had been up until 2 working on a passion project, a children's book I had been illustrating for no one in particular, just for the joy of it. And then someone knocked on my door. 3 knocks. Sharp and purposeful. The kind of knock that doesn't apologize for itself. I looked down at my pajama pants, covered in small printed cacti, a gift from my sister that I had initially found ridiculous and now wore constantly, and then at the sweatshirt, and then at the box of cereal in my hand, and I made the rapid calculation that whoever this was had caught me in a state of spectacular dishevelment. I put the cereal down. Ran a hand through my hair. Achieved nothing. Then I opened the door. There were two of them. A woman and a man, both in their 40s, both in sharp professional clothing that looked deeply out of place on my slightly overgrown front path. The woman was tall, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a precise bun. The man had round glasses and a leather portfolio under his arm. The woman looked at me, pajama pants, enormous sweatshirt, questionable hair, and her expression did not flicker once. "Claire Ashford," she said. "Yes," I said carefully. "My name is Renata Voss." She extended her hand. "This is my colleague James Park. We're from Holloway Creative Group. We'd very much like to talk to you, if you have a moment." Holloway Creative Group. I knew that name. Everyone in the design world knew that name. Holloway was one of the most respected creative agencies in the country. They had rebranded Fortune 500 companies. They had won more industry awards than I could count. They had produced campaigns that had become, genuinely, part of cultural memory. Why were they standing on my doorstep on a Thursday morning? I blinked. "Of course. Please, come in." "I'm sorry, I wasn't expecting anyone." Renata Voss smiled. It was a precise, warm smile. "We should have called ahead." "That's on us." I made coffee. Because my hands needed something to do and because offering these two immaculate people a seat on my second-hand sofa while I stood there in cactus pajamas required some kind of structural support. They sat. James Park opened his portfolio. Renata Voss accepted her coffee with genuine thanks and looked around my living room with the focused attention of someone cataloging details. My living room walls were covered in my work. Not framedly, gallery style, more organically. Pinned illustrations. Color studies. Pages torn from sketchbooks. A half-finished poster for a local farmer's market leaning against the bookshelf. It was chaotic and personal and not at all what you'd expect from someone receiving professional visitors. "These are yours?" Renata said, nodding at the walls. "Yes. It's a little, I know it looks like a lot. It looks like a working creative mind," she said simply. And then she turned back to me. "Miss Ashford. Are you familiar with the Meridian campaign?" I nearly dropped my coffee. The Meridian campaign was arguably the most celebrated advertising project of the last decade. A global wellness brand. A campaign built on a philosophy of quiet, sustainable living. The visuals had been breathtaking, hand-drawn in style, deeply human, each image feeling like something between an illustration and a memory. It had won every major award in the industry. It had been covered in design publications worldwide. Design students studied it. I had studied it. "Of course I am," I said. Renata nodded. "We created it. And the lead illustrator on that project," she paused, "found your work 8 months ago. Through a small blog you keep. The one where you post your personal illustrations." My blog. My blog. I had started it 18 months ago as a kind of journal. Low stakes. Almost no followers. I posted things I made for myself, the children's book pages, botanical studies, the occasional portrait. I had never imagined it as anything professional. It was more like a private sketchbook that happened to be technically public. "Someone at Holloway reads my blog?" I said. My voice came out slightly strangled. "Amara Chen reads your blog," Renata said. "Amara is our creative director. She has been following your work for 8 months. And 6 weeks ago, she came to me with a proposal." James Park opened his portfolio and turned it toward me. I looked down at the page. And the world went very quiet. It was a campaign brief. A new client, a major lifestyle brand I recognized immediately, the kind of brand that was genuinely beloved, not just commercially successful. The kind of brand that made things people kept for years. And at the center of the brief, in Amara Chen's handwriting, were 4 words. This should feel like Claire. My name. In a brief that had clearly been circulating at one of the most prestigious creative agencies in the country. I looked up at Renata Voss. I don't understand, I said. Not rudely. Just honestly. We want you to lead the illustration work for this campaign, she said. Creative partnership with Amara. Full creative control over the visual language. It's a large project. 18 months of work. She paused. The contract would be worth $1.2 million. The number landed in the room like something physical. $1.2 million. I set my coffee mug down on the table because I genuinely did not trust my grip. I started. Stopped. Started again. Can I ask, why me? There are established illustrators, people with proper agencies, people whose work feels manufactured, Renata said directly. Amara's exact words were, everyone else is trying to make something that looks like Claire's work. I want the actual thing. My eyes were burning. I pressed my lips together. Breathed through my nose. Do not cry in front of these people, I told myself firmly. You are wearing cactus pajamas. You have already lost enough dignity today. I'd need to read the full contract, I said. My voice was impressively steady. I was very proud of it. Renata smiled. That precise, warm smile. Of course. They left me with a folder. I stood at the door and watched their car pull away, and then I closed the door and stood in my hallway with the folder in my hands, and I did not move for a very long time. Then I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor. Milo, my dog, a medium-sized disaster of a rescue mutt who had been my companion for the past year, wandered over and put his head in my lap with the kind of timing that made me think dogs understand more than we give them credit for. Milo, I said. Something just happened. He wagged his tail. I don't know if I should trust it, I said. He wagged his tail again. That's not helpful, but thank you. I called my sister, Bex. She picked up on the second ring. I'm in a meeting, she said immediately. Holloway Creative Group just offered me $1 million contract, I said. A pause. I'll call you back in 30 seconds, she said. She called back in 20. Start from the beginning, she said. Do not leave anything out. Include what you were wearing. Cactus pajamas, I said. Oh my God, Claire. I told her everything. She interrupted approximately 14 times. By the end, she was crying, my sister, who cried at nothing, who had sat dry-eyed through both of our parents' funerals, actually crying. You have to do it, she said. I know. Claire, do you know what this is? This is the thing you were always supposed to be doing. Before Marcus. Before all of it. I looked at the folder on my kitchen table. I know, I said again. More quietly. Call your lawyer. Get it looked over. And then say yes. Bex, I said. I'm scared. I know you are, she said. Do it scared. I spent 3 days reading that contract with a lawyer and asking questions and reading it again. Every time I sat down with it, something in me kept waiting for the catch, the clause that would make it unravel, the detail that would reveal it as a mistake or a misunderstanding. There was no catch. On the evening of the 3rd day, I sat at my kitchen table with the signed contract in front of me and a pen in my hand, and I thought about the woman I had been 6 years ago, the one with the studio apartment and the Pantone swatches and the life that was modest and entirely her own. I thought about how I had let that woman get very small. And I thought about how, on a drafty Birch Street with a wild backyard and a disaster dog and a personal blog that almost nobody read, she had found her way back. I signed my name. I want to tell you what happened after, because this story has a second twist that I did not see coming. 3 weeks into the project, I had my first video call with Amara Chen. She was exactly what I expected, sharp, warm, direct, with the kind of creative mind that makes you feel like you're thinking better just by being in conversation with it. We talked for 2 hours about the campaign vision. About color and feeling and the particular quality of images that make people feel seen rather than sold to. It was one of the best creative conversations of my life. At the end of it, Amara looked at me through the screen with an expression that was curious and careful. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. "Sure," I said. "There's a quality in your work, it's very specific. It feels like someone who has had to rediscover something they lost. Like the work is coming from a place of recovery, almost." She paused. "I don't mean that as a negative. I mean it as the most precise compliment I know how to give. It's the reason I brought your name to Renata." I sat with that for a moment. "I went through a divorce 2 years ago," I said. "And before that, I had spent several years not really making things for myself." She nodded slowly. "And the blog started after?" "Yes. That's what I see in it," she said. "The work of someone who came back to themselves. It's rare. And it's the thing this brand needs." She tilted her head. "The campaign's theme is reclamation. Returning to what is essential. We needed an artist who actually understood what that feels like from the inside." I thought about the cereal box. The cactus pajamas. The sweatshirt I still hadn't thrown away. I thought about the wild backyard and the bad first garden and the children's book pages pinned to my walls for no one but me. "I understand it from the inside," I said. "I know," Amara said. "That's why you're here." The campaign launched 14 months later. I won't describe every detail of those months, the work, the collaboration, the moments of doubt and the moments of certainty, except to say that it was the hardest and the most alive I had ever felt in my professional life. Amara was everything I hoped she would be. The brand trusted us with a generosity that still astonishes me when I think about it. The campaign was called Essential. It ran globally. In print. In outdoor installations. In a short film that used my illustrations as a visual language throughout. The response was, "I don't have a word for it." You know, a thing has worked when strangers write letters. Not emails, actual, handwritten letters, forwarded to the agency. People writing to say that a particular image had made them feel something they hadn't been able to name. That it had made them feel like returning to themselves. My blog, which had hovered around 300 readers for 2 years, gained 140,000 followers in 1 month. There is one more thing I want to tell you. The morning the campaign launched, before I had seen any of the response, before I knew how it would land, I went out into my backyard. The garden was no longer wild. It had taken me 2 full years, but I had learned how to tend it. It was not perfect. There were still unruly corners, stubborn weeds, plants that had made decisions I hadn't planned for. But it was green and alive and it was mine. I sat in the grass with my coffee, in my cactus pajamas, yes, still, with Milo pressed against my side. I thought about the woman who had stood in a courthouse 2 years ago and jumped off a cliff without checking for water. There had been water. There had always been water. I just couldn't see it from up there. Marcus called that week. I let it go to voicemail, and his message was gracious and brief. He said he'd seen the campaign, that the work was extraordinary, that he was glad for me. I texted back, "Thank you. I hope you're well." And I meant it. Genuinely, without complication. Because what I had built here, the house on Birch Street, the wild then tended garden, the disaster dog, the work I made at 2 in the morning because I couldn't stop, I had not built it in response to Marcus. I had not built it to prove something or to heal something or to become someone worth leaving. I had built it because I remembered, just in time, that I was someone worth becoming. There is something I want to say to anyone listening who is in the middle part right now, the part where you've just jumped and you can't yet see the water. You made the right call, leaving. Or staying. Or starting. Or stopping. Whatever brave, terrifying thing you did. The work that feels like it's for nobody right now, the blog, the paintings, the sketchbook, the thing you make at midnight with no audience, that is the most important work of your life. Someone is going to see it. Maybe a stranger. Maybe a version of yourself you haven't met yet. Keep making it. Keep making it even when you're in the sweatshirt. Even when you're eating cereal from the box. Even when the garden is wild and the dog is a disaster and the bank account is terrifying and nothing looks like what you thought it was supposed to. The knock will come. And when it does, I want you to be the person who has been making things in the meantime, the person who has been faithfully, stubbornly, quietly becoming. That person answers the door. And she changes everything. Thank you for listening. If this story found you at the right moment, share it with someone who needs it today.